It's me back with another YouTube video and also the cat. Today, for the start of Aries season and the new Zodiac calendar, I thought I would do the astrological book tag. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in, start with Aries, which is the first sign of the Zodiac, hence the new astrological year starting. And the question, it's not really a question, but the question for Aries is to name books full of desire. So my preferred form of desire in fiction, well, or even nonfiction, I guess, is kind of like the angsty yearning kind of desires. So I don't read a lot of steamy, explicit stuff. I prefer, I don't know. Anyway, so I have a hard time thinking of something that would fit this in the traditional sense. I guess maybe Philippa Gregory books. I only thought of that because The Other Boleyn Girl is maybe the first book I remember reading that had more sex in it. I don't know. For me, I prefer things like Tokyo Babylon. I promised myself I wouldn't mention manga in this, but there's no way around it, because when it comes to relationships, I think I tend to like the stuff in manga the most. So, that kind of yearning or unrequited, or I don't know. Anyway, I'll stick with Philippa Gregory, The Other Boleyn Girl. I've read some of her other stuff. I can't remember the names of any of them. To me, after a while, they all kind of felt alike. But let's move on to Taurus. Taurus is to name a book that's beautifully written. So Taurus is the second house of the Zodiac. It's the house of material possessions and physical beauty generally, but a very kind of materialistic house. Not to say that if you're a Taurus, you're a materialistic person. It's just, the general associated traits. So a book that's beautifully written, I would say pretty much anything by Kazuo Ishiguro, Never Let Me Go, and, his Nocturnes, and So The Remains of the Day, things like that. I think he's a beautiful writer. He writes really beautiful prose. I think Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel was really beautifully written. And let's see, I'm trying to think of what else. For poetry, I really like Cemetery Nights by Stephen Dobbins. I wouldn't say that it's an elevated style of writing, but I really still find it very beautiful. Maybe The Memoirs of Cleopatra by Margaret George. I think I remember that feeling very dense prose. Let's see, for Gemini. Well, Gemini is the twins. It's or even a dual personality, a Jekyll and Hyde thing, which I guess the prompt for Gemini is a book featuring twins. Now, the first couple that came to mind, they would be spoilers, so I don't want to mention them. So I had to stop and think about other books that had twins in them. That wasn't a big secret that there was a twin. The Sweet Valley High books, I read those, middle school, high school. I don't think it's a spoiler to say The Dark Half by Stephen King. If you haven't read it, and it's more an alter ego of an author. I don't know if it's technically a twin, but Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, there's a twin in that, so I guess those count. Sorry, my camera just decided to freeze up for some reason. This is like a brand new laptop, so I don't know what the deal is, but I got cut off in the middle of Cancer. Cancer, as I was saying, is a very sensitive sign. It rules the 4th house, which is the house of home and your roots and your family, and you know, it's ruled by the moon, which is very moody and emotional. So the prompt for Cancer is name a book that was a tearjerker. And I think, you know, the obvious answer is Where the Red Fern Grows. I think anyone who's ever had to read that, like in school, or I didn't have to read it in school, but I did read it on my own because I went through a phase where I read animal books all the time. So Lassie Come Home, actually that made me cry too, and Where the Red Fern Grows, and Socks by Beverly Cleary. So anything like that, those make me cry. Animal books make me cry, I guess. The Trouble with Tuck. And then the other book that came to mind, the one I can remember crying at, was One Day by David Nichols. And, you know, never mind the movie, that was terrible, but the book, and I won't spoil anything here, but the book has a point at which I was pretty ugly crying. So those are the ones that make that list. So then Leo is our fun 5th house, entertainment and leisure, and also like children, you know, just playful. But I guess because it's a lion and it's seen as strong, the prompt is like a book with courageous characters in it. Yeah, the Leo, the strength card, I guess. I guess there's some courage involved. I'm still reading A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. And I will at least say, I'm like 40% done. I keep getting distracted with other things. But I will say the characters are all pretty courageous. Not all terribly bright. They make some pretty bad decisions, and they're very infuriating in a lot of ways. But I'll give them the whole, you know, the courageous thing. They've got that going for them. Virgo is a book that was pure perfection. Okay, so Virgos are perfectionists, by the way. A little bit of control freak, too. I don't believe that any book is perfect. I'm sure a lot of people say that if they do this book tag, but like, if I had to say, oh, here's a book that when I read it, I felt almost perfect. A Dark Shade of Magic. I remember really, really just loving that book when I read it and feeling like it was just so good. And The Raven Boys, which was the first in that Raven cycle, I felt the same way. Like, I actually just went and reread it right away. Like, I was just like, I read it and I was like, I gotta read it again. And maybe Good Omens is a book that I think is about as good as it can be, or that a book can really be for its time. I mean, obviously it's dated. They kind of, you know, updated it a bit in the limited series or whatever. But anyway, I think those are the closest to perfect for me. I mean, maybe In the Woods, which I actually have listed for a different prompt, but that book sticks in my mind as a nearly perfect book, even though I haven't reread it in a really long time. Libra, The Scales, right? A book that's neither good nor bad. This was actually one of the hardest things for me to answer, because like, you remember the books that are really good and you remember books that are awful, and then everything in the middle just kind of fades from memory. And so there are probably a bazillion books I've read that were neither good nor bad, that made like very little impression, or like and so I was trying to It's like walking around my house. Like, obviously I don't own nearly as many books as I've read in my lifetime. So I'm walking around my house. I'm like looking at the bookshelves because you save the ones you like, right? And I'm like, which ones? And then I was like, well, the Enola Holmes books, they're average. They're not, to me, fantastic, but they're not terrible. So maybe those, you know, I'm sure there's just like a ton of books from when I was a kid or something that would fit this, but I honestly, like, my mind's a blank. Scorpio, a book dark and mysterious. Scorpio rules the 8th house, which is death and taxes, basically. And anything underground, so like gemstones, you know, Hades. I love dark and mysterious, so there's just like, I could just name books all day, but In the Woods by Tana French. The Sandman comics, those are kind of dark and mysterious. Turn of the Screw, love that. So I love things like that too. But there's a book, lesser known, called City of Masks by, I want to say his name is Daniel Hecht. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's kind of a dark and creepy book. There's a book called The White Forest, and I cannot even remember the name of the author. That sticks in my mind as something that was dark and creepy. You know, that's my bread and butter. That's where I go. Like, that's what I look for when I'm reading, like, you know, that's my Black Butler and my Tokyo Babylon and my X mangas. Like, so, yeah. So all of those, and there are just, like, there's tons more, right? But, like, I'll leave it at that. Those are good ones. Those are good dark and mysterious books. For Sagittarius, a book full of adventure. I feel like we already talked about, like, courageous characters in it, like, that kind of go hand in hand. So, but I could go basic and be like, well, you know, the Rick Riordan books, because I've been reading those to my kids. So, the Magnus Chase and the Apollo, which I like more than the Percy Jackson and Jason Grace ones. That's just me. It was a series when I was a kid called Vesper Holly by Lloyd Alexander. And I loved those, and they're very adventurous because Vesper is kind of an Indiana Jones type character. Watership Down is a good adventure book, as long as you don't mind that it's rabbits having the adventure. So I think those all, I don't read like epic, tend not to read epic books. I've talked about this before. Epic fantasy to me is like, it's a lot of work, so I just don't read it very often. So I wouldn't say, well, so like Neverwhere, that's got adventure in it. It's also kind of in the dark and mysterious. I don't know. Anyway, I think those are good. Let's go on to Capricorn. A book that made you think. Think about what? A good book lives in me for a long time, and I'll like ruminate over the characters, and I'll like kind of obsess a little bit because I have that kind of addictive, obsessive streak in me when it comes to stuff like that. But like, if you're talking about like think philosophically, then we're gonna be looking at things from my college days. I have a media studies degree, so basically anything that required me to take apart a text. Textual Poachers by Henry Jenkins is just one of my Bibles. You know, obviously Channels of Discourse Revisited, things like that. Anything that's about like pop culture and taking it apart and examining it. If you want to talk about thinking in, I would say, so I started reading like mystery novels when I was really young, like Hercule Poirot, and those taught me how to think specifically I don't know how to explain it, but books like that taught me how to, you know, in the Sherlock Holmes books, they taught me how to look for very specific kinds of things, not only in books, but in the world around me, like to be observant and to like pick up on clues and just body language and you know, just little things that allow me to read a situation pretty quickly. So I would say those books made me think. They changed the way I think. Like, honestly, at least I think they did. So there's that. Aquarius, a quirky book. Okay, I'm Aquarius rising. And I will admit to the quirky. Okay, so there are a lot of quirky books. The Gum Thief by Douglas Copeland. That's an odd one. What else? Like maybe the Peter Grant books by Ben Aronovich, which I know I've mentioned before, but like if you start with like Rivers of London, and also known as Midnight Riot, those are quirky-ish. They definitely set up a kind of quirky world. Yeah, so those are quirky. And then an imaginative book, which I think the Rivers of London one fits that too. Watership Down's pretty imaginative. Well, there's a lot of books that are imaginative. Like, that's what we love about a lot of our fiction, right? Is just how imaginative it can be. But for this one, I'm gonna go with The Chronicles of Chrestomanci by Diana Wynne Jones. And that's actually 4 books. There are 4 books in this little series. What is it, like The Lives of Christopher Chant, Witch Week, The Magicians of Caprona. This is not at all in order. What's the first one? Lives of Christopher Chant is the second one. I can't remember the first one. Anyway, they're good. They're great. So I find those ones, well, I find Diana Wynne Jones just delightfully imaginative anyway, but like, but those ones are my favorite by her. So I definitely recommend that to people. And it's an adventure. Not like questing adventure, but still adventurous. Got some courageous characters in there. The Magicians of Caprona is just really, like, at one point people get turned into puppets. It's very strange. Anyway, it's quirky, it's imaginative. I feel like quirky and imaginative are related, actually. But Aquarius and Pisces are maybe a bit related. Aquarius is more aloof and Pisces is more, like, empathetic, but they're both a little bit odd. You get into the end of the Zodiac at that point, and it gets, Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So that is my, like, list or my responses for all of the astrological signs. I'm sure there are, like, a gazillion others that I could think of if I went back and, like, looked at all my old history of things that I've read. But what I mostly did was just wander around the house and look at my bookcases and go, what book fits this prompt? Which kind of limited me, aside from books that, like, just stick in your head. And hopefully I will finish a book and have an actual book review to do at some point. I did read through 29 of Black Butler, but, like, I don't really have anything new to add to that at the moment. It's ongoing. I'm reading Conjuring of Light. I'm reading 88 Names by Matt Ruff. I'm rereading The India Fan by Victoria Holt, just to compare it to Minfrey in the Morning, which there's I think a lot of Victoria Holt's books are the same or similar. They have a lot of the same elements over and over, so it's kind of a weird juxtaposition. I'm also rereading The Once and Future King, partly for my next book that I'm writing, and partly just for fun because I haven't read it since I was like 13 or 14. And I was like, oh, you know what I want to do? I want to revisit the Arthurian legends. So that's what I chose to do. So, and yeah, I've got a book coming out in October. I will talk more about that when I have like a cover to reveal and all that good stuff. If you follow me on Twitter, you will see my pinned tweet is the blurb for the book. Check it out, see if it's something that sounds interesting to you, and pass on the word. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you hopefully next time.